know, with MetaTrader 4 and even more with MetaTrader 5, we can trade several time frames. And these time frames can be classified into two large groups, the standard time frames and the custom time frames. For the standard time frames, it depends on MetaTrader 4 or MetaTrader 5. MetaTrader 5 is richer than MetaTrader 4, but let's consider MetaTrader 4. And we have the time frame from the 1 minute time frame up to the monthly time frame, but we can classify them in a different way: short term, medium term, long term, very long term. For example, if we consider short term trading, and this has nothing to do with the fact that we are trend followers. So the short-term trading will consider using the 1 minute time frame, the 5 minute, the 15 minute, or the 30-minute time frame. And then we have the medium term, H1 and H4. H4 is very often at the limit between what we can consider medium term and long term. And in the long term, we will also include the daily time frame, and for the very long term, we will consider weekly and monthly time frame. Personally, I don't like to trade the M1. In the past, I have tested and practiced with the 15-minute and the 30-minute time frame. I have tried the 1 hour time frame, which is a nice time frame to trade, but which requires some organization. I have been tempted at some point to trade with the H4, but I have found that in my own situation, the daily is more appropriate. And I will explain more in detail what does this mean. The weekly time frame, for those of you who have time to handle their trades on a very long time period, is also a very interesting time frame, and I will show. The monthly we can forget; it's a very too long term to trade. And then we have the custom time frames, and by custom time frames I mean all the other non-standard time frames we can build using the offline chart of MetaTrader. And so we can build, in fact, any time frame we want. I have mentioned 3 of them, which are the most important custom time frames many traders are using, even nowadays, and for many years, the 6 hours, the 8 hours, and the 12-hour time frame. But we can consider any time frame. I even know, for example, professional traders using the 45-minute hours, which is a little less than 1 hour time frame. And now let's consider how to choose the best time frames. And then I will show how to build offline chart. I will show 2 types of ways to do that today. And so when we consider to trade a higher time frame, either a standard time frame or a custom time frame, we have always to ask ourselves, what are our objectives in trading, and what is the time we can dedicate to trade? Because we may have different types of constraints. It's not obvious that each trader is a full-time trader, maybe as often a part-time trader. And so the fact that a trader is a part-time trader, the trader cannot dedicate many hours during a day to focus and to handle on the trades. And so the trader has to make a choice of another organization to trade. And so the time constraint is very important. For example, a trader may have another job, may have other activities like sport, like family obligations, and so on. And so the time to trade is or may be very limited. Now, it's not because the time is very limited to trade that trading is a hobby. Whatever the time we can dedicate to trade, we have always to consider trading as a professional activity. And so we have to pay a lot of attention to the trade we are handling if we want our trading activity to generate some revenue, a complementary revenue, or more than a complementary revenue. And so the time constraint must be considered very seriously in such a way that the trading activity and all the tasks which are concerned by trading fit harmoniously in our life. And this depends, of course, on each trader. One trader is not equivalent to another trader. The constraints are not necessarily the same. And so There is another point in order to help choosing the right time frame or the most appropriate time frame, because there is no right time frame. All the time frames are good, in fact. If you remember, we consider opening a trade or closing a trade partially or totally based on setups, entry setups or exit setups. And we wait for the close of the setup. And so this means that when we trade with time bar charts, if we take a specific time frame, for example, the 4-hour time frame, we need to check our chart every 4 hours at worst, because any bar can be an entry setup. And so we have to check at worst the chart every 4 hours. If we trade with the daily time frame, we'll have to check the chart every day at worst, because not all the bars we will observe will be a setup bar, but potentially it can be a setup bar. And so the fact that we have to check the chart and then analyze the chart very carefully takes time. And so that time we can dedicate will depend on the time frame. Or the time we will have to dedicate will depend on the time frame. But the type we need to dedicate does not necessarily correspond to the time which is available to us. And so this is why you have to consider, based on these time constraints you may have, what is the best time frame to use. Let's take an example. Let's suppose that you have a normal job, a 9-to-5 job, as we usually say, and you have 2 hours at your disposal during the lunchtime, okay? During the lunchtime. Many would consider that trading the 5-minute time frame would be appropriate. But this is not appropriate, because you have to consider the following point. 2 hours represent how many bars with a 5-minute time frame? 24 bars. The probability to have a setup bar inside a series of 24 bars, it's not so high. And even if you have one, you will not have time enough to see the movement developing. And so, obviously, if you don't have the possibility while you are at the office or on your job place, you will not have necessarily the possibility to check your chart regularly. And so the time frame, that time frame is not appropriate. It's better than to consider a higher time frame. And this is true for any time frame you would like to consider. So Dan asks, is the day end defined as New York close? Yes, indeed, Dan. Officially, the New York close is always the official close of the day and open of the next day. Okay? Almost all the professionals consider 5 p.m. Eastern Time as the close of the day. Okay? And so at least the big boys take that definition. And this is why it is, by the way, interesting to use, at least for our studies, our analysis, platform for which the midnight corresponds to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And so this is what I have just explained about the time constraint, which give us an idea of the time we can dedicate to our trades, must be analyzed carefully in order to choose which time frame is most appropriate, either a standard time frame or a custom time frame. Give me just my example. As you know, my preferred time frame to trade is the 5-minute time frame, because I am a full-time trader, even if I trade on average only 2 or 3 days per week. But this is simply because I choose, or I try to choose, the best setups, the setup by the book. But I like also to have trades running on a higher time frame. And at some point I have considered the 4-hour time frame, because the 4-hour time frame is also a nice time frame to trade. But I have observed that with the 4-hour time frame, I had to check my chart too often. And so this was more a distraction than a serious activity to prepare my trades and then to handle the trades. And then I have considered to try the weekly time frame. And then with the weekly time frame, I have found that it was easy for me to stay away from the chart and sometimes to forget the trades, which is not good. Forgetting a trade, leaving a trade open without checking the trade regularly, it's not very professional. Okay? And then I have tried the daily time frame. And with the daily time frame, for me, I have found that in my entire set of activities, it was the ideal time frame for my long-term time frame, because this allows me to check my chart minimum once a day, precisely at 5 p.m. New York time, when we have the market closing, because the close of a daily bar corresponds then to the close of the day. And because I also trade 2 or 3 days per week, and I have no problem to check my chart on the day I don't trade, checking my chart, my daily trade 1 or 2 times per day, in my case, is not a problem. And so I have found finally that the daily time frame was the ideal long-term time frame I could use. And now, so I have 2 time frames I trade with: the daily time frame, yes, and the 5-minute time frame. Now, in terms of the way to use the max on these 2 time frames, the concept and the rules are the same. Some adaptations will be necessary, as I will explain in a moment. Okay? So, is 5 p.m. New York the time when we get charged overnight next day interest? Yes, indeed, Robert. 5 p.m. is the rollover time when the interest rates are calculated, so either charged on your account or paid on your account. With that small nuance that on the Wednesday we have triple interest, because it takes into account the interest of the Wednesday and the interest of the 2 days of the weekend, because during the weekend the open trades have also interest. And so you will be paid, or you will have to pay interest depending on the differential of interest rates between the 2 currencies of the pair you are trading, and depending on the direction of your trade. Okay. Now, with many currencies having small interest rates, the differential of interest is very small for many pairs, so don't be surprised if you are charged an interest rate for almost all the pairs you are trading. This is normal, because it is not necessary. It is not only the differential between the interest rate which is taken into account, but also some markup for the broker. And so the real interest rate which has to be paid to you will be smaller than the differential, and the interest rate you will have to pay will be larger than the interest rate, and the difference is the broker markup, okay, which depends from one broker to another. And why is the Wednesday the triple interest day? Because in fact, in terms of accounting, the interest is not the interest of the day, but the interest of 2 days ago, okay? And so, but this is a nuance which is not so important. Every day you have, during the week, you have the interest or the swap. They are called swaps also, and triple swap on the Wednesday. Well, you can check that, for example, even with a demo account. Open a trade in a demo account on a Wednesday and check your terminal panel or your history of trades after the New York close. And so you will see the swap appearing in your statement. Well, okay, so is it clear for how to choose the time frame you would like to trade, you would like to consider? And don't believe that you can necessarily choose the appropriate time frame at once. You will have to make tests, possibly, in order to find if that higher time frame you want to consider and you are testing will be appropriate for you. And don't hesitate to make change if necessary. Okay? You need to feel really comfortable with the higher time frame you would like to use. Don't look necessarily for the performance, because of course the performance of your trading account will depend on the time frame. Generally, when we use a smaller time frame, we will make more profit when we apply the max correctly. So this means that with a higher time frame, the performance would be smaller. But as I will show you, it's the consistency which is important. It is not necessarily the fact that you can you have to make high returns to grow an account rather quickly. And in terms of risk management, as I will show later today, Jean-François, indeed a higher time frame means also a larger account, but not so large as you will see, okay? And so I will give some indication on how you can build an account if you need to have a larger account to the higher time frame. Now, how can we build, in fact, a custom time frame? So to build a custom time frame, we need to build what we call an offline chart. And an offline chart can be built with several types of tools. It can be built with a script. It can be built with an indicator. It can be built with an EA. Some script may be used also as EA. It depends how the script has been developed. What I'm going to show you today is two possibilities with one standard tool included in MetaTrader and with an equivalent tool which is a little more elaborated. But both may have some restrictions, as I will explain later. Okay? So let me show you now with a MetaTrader platform here. And let's consider a pair like the Euro-US dollar. Okay? And so by standard with MetaTrader 4, we have the 1 minute, the 5, 15, 30 minutes, 1 hour, 4 hour, daily, weekly, and monthly. And let's suppose we want to build the 8 hours time frame. So when we want to build a higher time frame, that higher time frame must always be built from a lower time frame. And the higher time frame must always represent a multiple, an entire multiple of the smaller time frame. For example, if we want to build the 8-hour time frame, we can use either the 4 hour, because 8 hours is 2 times 4 hours, or we can use 8 times 1 hour, or we can use 16 times 30, and so on and so on. For example, if we start with the 5-minute time frame, 1 hour corresponds to 12 times 5, and so 8 hours would correspond to 12 times 8 or 96. So 8 hours correspond to 96 times 5 minutes. Okay? And so this means that that multiplier will be one of the parameters to use in the tools creating the corresponding offline chart. And the standard tool we have with MetaTrader is a script. And in the script panel here, you can see a tool called Period Converter. Period Converter. It is that tool which will be used to build the offline chart for higher time frame. And let's consider, to make it simple, I will start from the 1 hour time frame. So the multiplier to be used is 8, because 8 times 1 hour corresponds to 8 hours. And we do that the following way. We drag and drop the script on the chart. Okay. In the common panel, we check that all the usual boxes are checked. And then in the input panel, we have just one parameter, which is the parameter or the multiplier factor. Okay? Nicole, no, this is not necessarily true, because indeed the risk is the same. The risk is the same. The percentage risk is the same. But with a larger stop loss, your trade size will be smaller. And depending what your broker allows you as the smallest size to trade, you may need a larger trading account. I will show that later, okay? So just be patient. So my multiplier factor here from the 1 hour time frame to generate the 8 hour time frame will be 8. So I write here 8 in the panel, and then, sorry, 8, where is my 8? It's here. And so I click OK, and then the script will generate the offline chart. We have to keep our chart open. We can iconize it, of course, if we want. And then we can go into the offline chart. So here, where is my cursor? Okay, here. I think the speed of my cursor is a little too fast, so too sensitive. So File, Open, Offline. We have to wait for the window to populate. And so we look for the euro, I think it was the euro US dollar. Yeah, euro US dollar. Euro US dollar. And we should find normally something called H8 here. You see? H8. And the file, the offline chart which has been generated, contains 1,587 bars for the moment. And each hour a new bar will be added. So we open the chart, and so we can apply our template. For example, I will apply here this template. And voila, we have the 8-hour chart, and each candle represents a time period of 8 hours. And so in one day we have 8 candles, so each series of 8 bars will represent one day. And so here I have separators representing how many bars. We have 15 bars, so this represents 5 days or 1 week. Okay? And so once you get your offline chart is adjusted, is updated in real time. Whenever a new tick comes, a new price comes, the offline chart is of course updated, because we have kept the 1-hour chart open.